Thank you very much, and good afternoon to everybody. Apologies, I cannot speak Danish, not yet, but you never know. It's really a pleasure to be with you today and really trying to share some experience around the world. And in fact, I didn't bring any specific example from Europe because you are European, so I think you know it. So I did brought from other parts of the world. It's a long presentation and I'm not going to go through it all, but I felt that it would be nice to leave with you some thoughts and some experiences. And please do keep in touch if you need more ideas, more information about some of the models. But I think when you start your discussion and when you organize this kind of discussion, and I have to say it's very good that you are doing that. We need changes in the science policy society interface. I think your concern was how can Denmark continues to build a knowledge society, and what are really the major issues that are facing all the countries that want to be in that position. And clearly one of them is human capital and how to train and guarantee that the human capital at national level is really ready to address all the global challenges that we face as countries, as regions, as the world. But also an important aspect of a knowledge society is really how can we discover and identify what our country can do of best and of different from others. What is our niche, both in products and in services, and then put our creativity and our human capital and our financial capital to realize that. Also, of course, good governance are always very important, and to make sure that there is no exclusion, that everybody feels that they can be part not only of the benefits of development, but also being part of that, of choosing the path of development. And sometimes we forget that. We think that people just want to live better. But sometimes all of us, we also want to contribute to really choose what kind of development path our society can follow. Another area, of course, is the financial system and the economical systems, very much on the top agenda now in Europe. How can we make sure that the financial crisis don't bring the countries down? But it's really in many ways how to promote entrepreneurship and to make sure that, again, all the human creativity and the human capital is mobilized to improve the quality of life of the countries. And also the importance of social and cultural characteristics. Again, many times we concentrate only on economic issues, and we forgot the environment, we forgot the social issues, and in order to have sustainable development, all these aspects have to be analyzed at the same time. So it's not an easy time, and principally because it's mostly an uncertain time. Every day we see crises, we see disasters, we talk about climate change, the impact of climate change, planet boundaries, tipping points, Anthropocene, the era where man is driving the changes in the planet. And more than ever, of course, we do need very strong scientific advice. So that's really the first point I would like to make today, and that's why it's so important that you are here. And in a way, the scientific community around the world is already changing the way they do science in order to respond to these global challenges. And this is a movement that is really accelerating, I would say. And even here at the University of Copenhagen, you have the Sustainability Science Center that is really inside the university promoting this approach to scientific programs that is really transdisciplinary. But more than that, it addresses development issues. It also brings stakeholders, not only, again, as beneficiaries, but also in formulating the scientific questions, and sometimes even in doing the research itself, you start having the need to involve other stakeholders than the more traditional ones that are the scientists. And that, of course, poses quite a lot of questions. But the reality is that in that way, the scientific community at the global level, they are already doing this movement to this called sustainability science approach or science for sustainable development. as you want to call it, and you see an increased number of major scientific programs that can be qualified of using this kind of issues. But it's not enough to do the good science and the best of science. It's really important also to communicate those results and to make sure that decision makers at different levels take those scientific discoveries into account when they take decisions. And late Professor Armstrong, she really put a lot of pressure on the scientific community when she said we have a responsibility to really engage with policymakers, with business, with society in general, to really make sure that we understand that our planet is at risk and there is an urgent need for action, and that action needs to be informed by science. And she was not the only one. In effect, a very important document for Rio+20 that I'm sure many of you followed is the report from the Global Sustainability Panel. And again, in this report, they really call to governments and to the scientific community to really make sure that scientific advice becomes part of everyday decision-making processes. And so, again, very glad to be here because it's important that we are discussing how that can be of best. But of course, if it was easy, we didn't need this meeting and we would need to reflect together. Unfortunately, we live in a polar world, and that will be there all the time. We have short-term government agendas, but we also need long-term policies. We are trained to deal with certain things. It's certain that if I do that, I will reach there. But the reality today is that it's not that certain. Things can happen in between, and we don't know why they happen. Also, the issue of disciplines versus inter and transdisciplinary science. It does mean that we don't need the disciplines. It does mean that we don't need fundamental sciences. But we also need other kinds of approaches to science. The disciplines have to work together. We need to really respond to development challenges that are in front of us and we cannot wait. And that creates, of course, a tension inside the scientific community. Scientific knowledge is normally distributed in very well-known channels, some of them very traditional in academia, others more related to policy making as policy briefs. But the reality is that there are hidden channels too. And if indeed we want to permeate policy making with scientific knowledge, we need to understand which are these hidden connections that we need to also interact in order to make sure that things go well. Economic interests versus social and environmental sustainability. Political, societal objectives versus scientific objectives. As researchers, as scientists, we have our own curiosity, we have our own questions, but how do we merge those with also the needs of society? And of course, the individual and coalition power versus citizen solutions, because it's about society, it's not so much about us. And that's the first thing the second thing I would like to raise is the need for stakeholder involvements. The relationship between scientific community and the governments and business, it cannot be out of what is society. And by bringing society also to the interface between science and policy, we really make that interface a much longer last and much stronger, because of course society interacts also with the political bodies, and therefore there is really a synergy there that it needs to be created. So these are, let's say, how I would frame some of the issues that you probably are facing when you start this discussion. And based on that, allow me to start then with some examples around the world. They are very different. I could have picked many other ones. There are different examples. I picked these ones because I know these institutions, so made it easier for me to talk to you about them. But as I said, there are a variety of systems. The first one is from my continent, from Ghana. The Technology Consultancy Center is based in Paul Nkrumah University of Science and Technology. They exist almost for 40 years now. And really the reason why they created this center was because the university felt that they were in an ivory tower and they could not really use the knowledge they were producing, their students were producing, to really influence, in particular, the small and medium enterprises that surrounded them, and also how to support their students to start a business, an enterprise. And so that's how they start creating this center. And it's really a center that brings the college, the different colleges from the university, and therefore there is a very good connection, and I think is this slide that shows that the center, they are responsible for the graduate enterprise development, but also for the industry and community services. But it's all linked because this feeds back to the teaching and research aspects of the university. So it's not something that the center is there, the professors go there, they give some time, and that's it. No, there is really a synergy that what they learn when they interact with industry, with community, with governments, they come back and change the way they teach their research programs. So this discussion that I think you had this morning about careers, I'm a full professor, I'm a full researcher, it's really different paths. And what is probably important and what is interesting in this model is that they can move. You can have a professor that in the beginning it's more on teaching and research, but then because something happened and he wants to push and have potential to bring this to industry, he may move to the center. And someone else will replace him on the teaching, research, 100% kind of things. But for that you need to discuss careers and you need to create flexible modes so that people can be used as best and can feel also comfortable where they are. They do several kinds of activities in several areas. It's the biggest university in Ghana, also the oldest one. But maybe what I would like to highlight, that probably this is different from your model, is that they have the technology park and the incubators. I don't think the Danish model have that. And that makes, in a way, a quite complex system to do. So they have been really very active and very good results. They are very respected, not only in their country, but outside Ghana. They engage also with technical assistance, not only inside, but also to other countries in Africa. And I think they really improve the way the university linked to industry, to communities. As I said, it's probably the most similar model to yours, this one that I'm presenting. They have really, in my view, it's a very good system for Ghana and for Africa in general. This is not the only center we have in Africa. Many universities in Africa have this kind of model. And because they really concentrate in micro, small and medium enterprises. And I think this is very important in Africa, where the private sector is still very small. And also the fact that they have the incubators and the technology park, it also allows their graduates to start their own business in the incubators. So they graduate and they go to the incubator and they start their own company there. The challenge of this model is that, of course, you can go so far. So they cannot go too much, they cannot say we cover the country. They really interact with the community that's near the university. So the ideal model would be that all the universities in Ghana and other countries, all of them had a center like this one. It's not the reality today, but one of the problems of this model is that they have so much possibility to grow. And also the funding. The funding is also a problem. They don't have government funding. This is really based on consultancy, so they do have to manage. And the way they do that, and many of the centers, university centers like this one do in Africa, they partner with private consultancy firms. Because sometimes the private consultancy firms, they have bigger programs and bigger projects. So they can, in a way, support the universities to deal with the short cash that they sometimes face. But funding, it's something that a center like this one always have to take into consideration. The second example is from Mexico, Latin America, is the Foro Consultivo Científico and Tecnológico, the Forum Scientific and Technological Forum. Basically, the government decided to create this autonomous institution to really give advice to the government on all the frameworks and programs related to science, technology, and innovation in the country. And that's what they do. They are mostly concentrated, all their consultative work and advice work, it's on the policies of the government. They don't do technology parks, they don't promote necessarily, they don't do research in specific areas, energy or agro-industry, like the example before. And the nice part about this forum is because they are autonomous and they have representatives from the Akademiet, from industry, from civil society organizations linked to science, technology, innovation, they are very credible. So when they advise the government that we need a new policy or change that policy, or need a new funding mechanism and so on, they are quite well accepted by the government. And they are supported, of course, fundamentally by the government, but they are really a forum where users of the system can really reflect what the system needs to give them better. And then based on that, they come to the government and they propose new policy instruments. The advantage of this model is, of course, being an autonomous institution, of promoting dialogue among different stakeholders, not only the producers of knowledge, of scientific knowledge, but also the users of that knowledge. And that, of course, creates this very interesting dialogue that I imagine you are having here today, that really allows the government to bring these stakeholders to the policy dialogue. They also have strong networks, so when the government needs any advice in something else, they are the right forum to go and say, we need specialists, say, in renewable energies and solar or in wind, and they will mobilize these people, because all the academies, the universities, the research institutions are linked to this forum. The disadvantage is that they are a narrow field. They deal mostly with STI policy related issues and really bringing scientific evidence to policy making. The third example, in fact there are two institutions, is from Korea. Korea have really a history, they went through different phases, but finally they have two different institutions with different mandates. One is the Center for STEPI, that really does industrial and technological policy research, and then they have KeyStep. And KeyStep, basically what they do is they monitor the impact of government policies in the development and the use of science, technology, and innovation for the development of the country. So you have two separate functions. You have STEPI that really does quite a lot of research. They promote research in other centers. They bring the knowledge that is needed for the government to take decisions. They do quite a lot of consultancy on technology management strategies. They collaborate with government, industry, academia, very high network internationally. They also do quite a lot of education and training. It's one of the areas we collaborate a lot. And KeyStep monitors that. How does that work? Is it really getting Korea where we want to be? Is it in line with our agenda, national agenda of development? So they plan national and science and technology strategies. They promote and they advise the government in allocation and adjustments of the budgets for research and development. They do the evaluation of the programs. And then they also do quite a lot on dissemination of knowledge in society. And that's where we work quite a lot also with KeyStep. And what I like about this Korean model is these two institutions thing, because they really can together trying to see how things are going. And for the government is good because they are independent. They don't depend on each other. They are completely separated. And I think this key step function is very important. Finally, the last one, and I think I have only 5 minutes left, is really the Chinese model. The Chinese model is based in academies. It's their academies that do the research-based public consultancy. And I brought the example of CASTED, and CASTED has in itself 8 institutes. And they do all the advice to government, to the ministry, and then to the rest of the government, and also for industry. And they are really an interesting model because the academies, they keep growing. I put CASTED, I could have put it CAS, that is the Chinese Academy of Science. They even have universities. They have 11 institutes and I think 3 or 4 huge universities. The biggest university in China is under the Chinese Academy of Science. So it's a completely different model. The advantage of this model is that probably you have less problems with careers because this is under the academy. So it's not a university hosting the centers that do the research-based consultancy. It's really the academy. And full professors are part of this academy. And in this academy, then they do the rest. So it's an interesting model, but probably very typical of China. And I will not go as in detail on this. Finally, and very quickly, I also brought the links with parliaments. They are also decision makers, and in many countries they become the decision makers in science, technology, and innovation. There are several models. There are formal and informal structures. There are, specific offices inside the parliament. Some of the offices are outside the parliament. But what is important is that Parliament also have these advice systems. And unfortunately, in many parts of the world, that doesn't exist. I know that in Denmark, you have this foundation now that does some of that work. In Africa, we are building, for instance, we are building this kind of support because it's not there yet. African parliamentarians, they take decisions related to science, technology, and innovation, but they have no scientific support to take those decisions. To finalize, let me say that there are for me a few characteristics of a good, efficient advice mechanism. One is that it has to take into consideration the need that we have today, that things are not only at local and global level, but they go across scales. And so when you build your scientific advice to your governments, your consultancies to your governments, remember that it's not only about Denmark, but Denmark is part of a bigger part. Connecting a diverse group of stakeholders, making sure that you not only give scientific advice, but that you are also able to influence the decision-making processes of the government. Because that also has to change. It's not just about bringing the right moment, the right knowledge in the right moment to governments or to business, but it's also how do you take decisions? And that, I think, is a very important issue. Also, don't be afraid to have more scientists doing this work. It's very important that scientists are involved in decision-making processes and in supplying the right knowledge in the right moment, in the right process to governments and businesses. Also, the issue of language is always a problem. And sometimes it's difficult for science to communicate well. And also the models that you use for governance, addressing several agendas, whose question we are answering, and don't be afraid to collaborate between public research and private research, public consultancy and private consultancy. We need all working together in order to really promote sustainable development. I thank you very much.